And we're at the 9 o'clock hour. And it's time for Sammy Guevara against Darby Allin. And I said, this isn't the main event. And then I thought, well, they want to have the match while they still have some of their viewers. And MJF came out on color with his jar of pickles, was eating his pickles. And this match, they actually opened up wrestling. And then they started doing some flips, but they were still kind of wrestling because it was like the flip would end up with a hip toss or whatever. They asked MJF, well, what happens if Sammy doesn't agree to lay down for you at All or Nothing? And then he said that the check won't clear. So let me ask you this. Let's say that people are supposed to work through this and say, okay, this plot works and Sammy beats Darby and the match at Double or Nothing is MJF versus Sammy. Then are they going to have a match first and then Sammy's going to lose on purpose? Or is he just going to lay down like the finger poke of doom? And in which case, why are we paying for the pay-per-view? Because it wouldn't make any sense for a guy to fight another guy for 20 minutes and then lose on purpose. So it would have to be a deal where he's just going to take the bump and take the check, which means that their main event is not really going to happen. So I don't want to buy the pay-per-view. Is that the logic, Brian, that they're selling us here?
I do not think logic applies to what they're trying to sell us here. They had an idea for MJF to have a match with the other four pillars, and they backed themselves up into it in the clumsiest and stupidest of ways, to the point where I certainly don't want to see it. I don't think there's too much logic here. I think this is kind of one of those holder things for MJF. You just got to hope they have the match, and he moves on to something else, because this hasn't done him any favors. I think for Jungle Boy, it's made him look worse than ever before.
Yeah.
Darby's shown more on the mic, and then he showed too much on the mic. You want him to stop talking. And what do you do with Sammy after this? Because they were starting to get it kind of... I don't want to say they were starting to get it over with Sammy being the goofy friend of MJF, but that's already done. So I don't know. I don't really think there's much logic, much booking sense, much good booking decision-making in any of this stuff with the Four Pillars feud.
And I'll go through it real briefly. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the program, if you're listening on YouTube, a different clip, but this should be MJF versus Darby Allin. There should have been a concerted push for Darby as a single to begin with. The rest of this is just wasted the whole thing and a lost opportunity. But nevertheless,
Sting? Where's Sting? He confronted MJF.
No.
He called out the world champion. We never saw him again.
Well, Action Andretti, where's he?
Hanging out with
Chris
Sting.
Jericho.
Maybe him and Sting are over at Miro's house having a party every Wednesday night.
Right.
Come over, watch the show.
Anyway, so the first 2 minutes of this match were good, and MJF was selling pickles on the commentary, and Sammy spit in Darby's eye and gave him a knee to the back and posted him start the heat, and then as soon as he did that, he wasted a ton of time milking the people, then going over and setting up to try to suplex Darby inside out to the floor. Like that was, but then Darby blocked it and took over on the apron. Then why cut him off and post him? If you're the next thing you're going to do is take the guy to the apron to do a move that everybody can see ahead of time, you're not going to do. And then the guy just takes back over. And then Darby allegedly tried to German suplex Sammy off the apron to the floor, which they have been on forever now, the apron, while the referee is standing there staring. And then Sammy grabs the referee to distract him face to face while he mule kicks Darby in the nuts. And then, as Darby ends up on the floor selling his nuts, the heel Sammy does a springboard moonsault off the top rope onto the babyface Darby on the floor, and that's the break spot. At one point in time, if you told a babyface, yeah, I'll do a fancier move than you're going to do in the entire match to cut you off for the heat, well, the babyface would have fucking just stuck his finger in his fucking eye. Anyway, so they come back from the break, and the first thing we see is Darby hits the Scorpion Death Drop a la Sting, and both of them are down. And then Sammy rolls out on the floor, and Darby does the dive that he does so great through the second and bottom rope, straight at Sammy, and Sammy catches him with a cutter on the floor. So Darby's coming 100 miles an hour headfirst through the ropes, and Sammy catches him with an offensive move that's supposed to plant his face on the floor. What does he do? He doesn't pick him up and roll him back in the ring where he can beat the guy. He walks off and leaves him and goes and pulls out a table and wastes another 30 or more seconds setting it up while the fans start chanting, "We want tables," instead of "Go Darby go," or "Please Darby win." And then Darby, after being cuttered on the floor at 100 miles an hour, by the time Sammy goes over and sets his table up, is back up and is making a comeback on Sammy. And Darby puts Sammy on the fucking table and climbs to the top rope. But Ty Meloconti comes out to the apron to distract him, and Sammy runs up and gives him a Spanish fly off the top rope for a 2 count. But then Sammy puts Darby on the table, out on the floor, and takes forever to go up to the top while giving us another symbol that he's crazy, because that's his thing. And then he does a flipping cannonball on Darby Allin onto the table, through the table, to the concrete floor. Again, where he can't beat the guy. But he maybe can get him counted out. Okay. So both of them sell for a second. And then Sammy rolls in. Now, bear in mind, Sammy off the top rope, flipping 2 revolution cannonball through a guy and a table to the concrete floor. He's in at the count of 5, which was about 45 seconds. And at the count of 9, you think, okay, Darby's going to get counted out. If there's ever to be a count out, that would be it. At the count of 9, Darby jumps up on his feet, rolls in the ring. And I started to hit the fast forward button at this point because, Jesus H. Christ, but apparently they're in the finish, so I stopped. Ty Meloconti shows up again and draws the referee again. And there's MJF, who gives Darby the skateboard. Pitches the skateboard to Darby, and then Sammy claps hands, falls down, takes a bump, and the referee turns around and sees the skateboard in Darby's hand and disqualifies Darby. So they're stealing from Eddie Guerrero. I mean, that finish is as old as the hills. I saw it in the early 80s, but not in this fucking instance. But then suddenly, Darby and Sammy are both up and they're both fine. And MJF levels Darby with a shot with the ring. And then at that point, they put up a graphic on the screen in the arena for the title match at the pay-per-view that was just decided 15 seconds ago with the finish of the match. But they got the fucking graphic ready to go. And then the heels get more heat on Darby. But Jungle Boy hits the ring with a chair and the heels powder. But Darby is mad at Jungle Boy that he didn't get down there quicker, apparently. And MJF gets a microphone and tells both of these guys and the fans off. And then Tony Schiavone interrupts. I'm still going. Sorry, Brian. Tony Schiavone interrupts. He's talked to Tony Khan. And next week, it's going to be a tag team match, MJF and Sammy against Jungle Boy and Darby. And if MJF and Sammy win, then the title match goes on as normal. But if Darby and Jungle Boy win, then it's a 4-way match for the title at the pay-per-view. And I wrote fucking hell. So they refuse to make stars even when it's handed to them. Jungle Boy's an anchor around this whole thing's neck. Sammy's getting in the way. And now we're going to get the 4-way that we were afraid we were going to get to begin with, despite the fact that Darby Allin had a couple of weeks of really hot performances and should be in a single title match so people might actually buy this fucking thing. What a mess. Your thoughts again.
I completely agree with you. It's a mess. The commentary show-wide was a problem. I'll probably say a little bit more about that later. And I have advocated for using Schiavone in a role like the commissioner, because he needs to be off commentary because he's useless. He does nothing, and in fact, he makes it worse because he causes Excalibur to get sillier, and next thing you know, serious shit's happening in the ring, and the two chuckle fucks on the microphone are just having a ball jerking each other off. Schiavone is good in that role. However, if you're going to have Tony Schiavone stand up there on the mic in front of the live room and call the world champion a heel, a prick, MJF needs to go over there, take him by his fucking earring, and throw his frumpy ass off the fucking stage. Why is Tony Schiavone dressing down MJF? Why?
I have no idea.
Is it to get a pop in the room? Why are you doing that?
Apparently somebody likes it.
Yes, somebody. I know who. The same goof who booked the whole fucking show. This is becoming the worst. I'm going to say it here. I've begun to hate watching AEW. I always kind of found things to get a kick out of. Moxie right now is pretty funny. But it's become such a bad show. The commentating is off the charts awful. Maybe the most counterproductive commentating team in AEW history, which is saying something. And again, using Schiavone like this, he's calling out MJF. And then it's the four-way match, which we called weeks ago. And they found an uncreative way to still get to this stupid match.
That nobody wanted to see.
Darby and MJF opened up a pay-per-view in, must have been 2021, I guess. I think it was. And it was the best match on the show. It was an instant classic. Like you said, that match, which opened up that show, being in the main event of this show, with a good build, that would have meant something. They had Sting come out there. Again, another guy dressed down the world champion. Has anything happened? Unless MJF has kidnapped Sting, Raka Khan style, and we haven't seen him on TV in several weeks because of that, why hasn't there been any follow-up on that? This whole thing has been so poorly put together. It's counterproductive to MJF, who should be the biggest priority in that company, because he's the brightest future of anyone in that company, and this has done no favors for him.
Well, but the biggest thing was Darby had a window there where they could have really fucking done something. Poor Darby. He's killing himself, and this was his chance. He may not get another one. It may not happen again because this is slogging him down.
I even think if he listened to people and didn't become babyface and heel in the same promo at times, Sammy and MJF, there was something there. Jungle Boy has nothing to do with any of this other than they anointed him as one of the four pillars a few years ago for no good reason other than All Japan had four guys. So now he's in the mix of all this. He doesn't belong. I think MJF Sammy would have been something if they had built it up well. MJF Darby clearly was the choice. Instead, we got a four-way for the world title. I'm sure it'll be all right because a few people in there are really talented, but I don't want to see that.
Well, and also now, here, one more thing. As MJF and Sammy were pissed off, and so am I, about the four-way revelation, and they were going to get in the SUV, MJF turns to Sammy and said, the car's full. There's no room. And the camera shows there's nobody in the fucking car. So Sammy turns around disappointed. So probably next week, Sammy will have had enough of MJF's tomfoolery and cause the other team to win the match. And then MJF has to defend against all four of them, blah, blah, blah. Whoopee.
It would have even been better, and I'm not saying this would have been good, if after this week's show, next week, Sammy finally got his hands on MJF and you did that match. But the four-way for no reason other than his four guys is so stupid.